right, so let's announce the voting results while during the break. So the question was, can AI pose an existential threat to humans? And there are 40 votes total, and 26 people are agreeing that it can, in fact, pose an existential crisis, while 14 others don't. So we currently have a majority. However, we will now host a brief discussion session of some questions to the panelists about existing scenarios where AIs have been observed to do things that they were not expected to do, and to get their insight as to whether they think that AI can actually pose an existential crisis or not. So without further ado, let's resume this session with our first question. So as we've already discussed, AI can learn different subjects much faster than humans are able to do. So is it possible that in the near future, AIs collaborate with humans to solve real-world problems, not just like basic problem solving like math, but let's say taking up people's jobs and perhaps discovering new theories? And if so, what implications would it have in our everyday lives? Would anyone like to answer that question?
Yeah, sure. So I think a few years ago, when AI wasn't yet like overwhelming such a big topic, initially when it started to go big, we were talking about how maybe dishwasher will be will be replaced, waiter will be replaced, and maybe, I think certainly, artists will not be replaced, right? But then right now, recently, have you seen the DALL-E 2 or like Stable Diffusion, what they're doing? So essentially, they're creating like so powerful AI that's able to just draw everything with just crazy amount of accuracy and imagination that's able to produce a painting that people would just purely be amazed by, right? But then the question would be like, okay, and then there are questions like, are designers going to be replaced? Or like, are painters are going to be replaced? And then the answer is actually that, like, why are dishwashers not yet replaced and actually artists, right? So the answer is that because right now there are so many pictures in the internet, so many data that are available, but then right now we still have relatively little data on how robots interact with the world, or like when you look at this thing, how does he know how this thing touch, or like how does he know like if an egg is not an actual, like how does he know an egg is fragile? But then for arts, it's actually like there are so many pictures there, and then it's actually able to learn, okay, what is a cat? Or like, what's a cat that looks like, or what's an alien? And then it's able to somehow infer, because it's a continuous idea, that, okay, what is an alien? Or maybe what's a cat that looks like an alien? And then it's somehow able to infer that. And the future, I want to go back to, okay, how is the job going to look like in the future? And is that currently the way we do digital painting is that we create different layers, and then for every single layer, we say, okay, this layer I will draw the hair, this layer I will draw the eye, and then I'll stack them together, and then say, okay, this is the picture. But then the future is going to be totally different, right? It's going to be, okay, I ask you to draw a girl, let's say, and then I'm actually unhappy with the hair. I just erase the hair, and I ask you to redraw it once again, and then I'll just give you some hints, and then you redraw it. And then in the future, it's going to be like, okay, there is no more people. So whenever I hire a designer, and then I keep saying, okay, maybe a little bit left, a little bit right, and then maybe, and then turn out the first version is actually the best one. It's going to be like an AI that's able to, like, okay, so whenever you have a client, and then you just throw an AI to him, and then ask the client to play with the AI, and that would be the perfect slave to draw everything he wants. And then he will give you that picture and say, okay, this is something that I might want, and then maybe you go with that direction. So the job is going to be so much better. Actually, if you think about it, I mean, you used to take like 3 designers to draw one thing, and then just to satisfy that crazy client. But then now we just throw AI to him, and then you will get a so much better idea on how you can draw stuff. So that's the topic that I picked share with you guys?
I think Sean did a good job describing how the future might look like in the industry or the working sector. And I think maybe I can share a bit more about how AI is being used or might be used in the future for research. Because I'm very interested in academics and research. And there was this very interesting research done using AI this year in March. I think it was March 7th, 2022, when the paper was released. I think you may be familiar with something called Deep Blue, which was the first AI engine that beat the best chess player in the world back in 1997, Garry Kasparov. And it was just an astounding moment for mankind that machines could beat human players. But what it was doing essentially was just calculating all the possibilities for the move and just analyzing, all right, this one's the better one. And there's all kinds of fancy maths and algorithm design involved with that. Like you build up a search tree and do all that. Well, we don't care about that, right? But what was essential was that it was basically brute forcing the search. But there was this remarkable progress or milestone in AI, which is essentially equivalent to, like, if you imagine Columbus discovering America, that was DeepMind. And then with Google's AlphaGo, it was like we landed on the moon. Google's AlphaGo was monumental because what it did was it beat the best Go players. And I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with Go, the board game Go. It's a 19 by 19 board game, and it's fairly complicated. Like, you can expect there to be around 250 moves or 250 possible moves each turn. And it was just not feasible for computers, like even very fast computers, even Google's supercomputers, to compute all the possibilities and analyze it, because judging which position is best was very tricky for Google's, like humankind's best minds when compared to chess. And it turned out that the AI model that Google had used to train its AI called AlphaGo was surprisingly general. So they used the same model for chess as well. And then turned out it can also be used in other board games as well. And where research is connected is that some random guy in Tel Aviv University in like some random country in the Middle East just thought, hey, why not do some actual research with this? And so he went on to tackle open problems in discrete mathematics and graph theory. And he said, oh, we can formulate this open problem as a board game and have this AI that Google has already developed to solve this open research problem. And he fed the AI model data after formulating the research problem, and turned out that the AI was able to construct concrete counterexamples to those open problems. So this year, some guy just had fun experimenting with like chess and Go's AIs, and ended up publishing like groundbreaking research in discrete maths and graph theory, which is very, like, you wouldn't normally think AI would start doing research this early, but this happened this year. So that's also very exciting or very scary depending on how you think about AI. Yeah.
So I will summarize those points, the words from two other speakers, into one sentence. AI is used as a tool in itself, the emplacement or a replacement of human beings. We cannot actually replace human workers in their workplace by AI, indeed, because we still need to input those instructions and data that needs human beings to work on. So I will make it very simple. Every single AI needs data to train, and will get feedbacks on those based on those data inputted. The draws the AI generated, or the chess those AI played, are actually inputted prior to the chess being played or the drawings being generated. There are other productions produced by some other drawers, some artists, or some chess players. Those are amazing chess players. So I would say that we still need those human beings exist in their workplace to how should I say that? To friends to play their chess and use those data to train those AIs and make our human beings better and better. That's how AI actually works for those computer scientists, so data scientists, to improve the human civilization. So my answer to that main topic, will AI actually cause some kind of threats to the human civilization? I would say that AI itself as a tool will not cause any existential problem to the human civilization. Yeah.
All right, thank you for your insight on that question. So not too long ago, in the previous Pokfulam Union session, we had discussed about the Ukrainian crisis. And we had come to the conclusion that one of the major causes of that conflict is due to fundamental differences between two nations. So to put into context, in 2018, this is a different scenario, Amazon created an AI that would be used to recruit employees by analyzing their portfolios and comparing them against existing employees' portfolios. It was soon discovered that the AI had in fact developed a bias against women. So essentially what it would do is, as soon as it would detect a woman, it would try to disfavor that portfolio for a male candidate. So the question that I would like to ask to the panelists is that how did it develop this sort of a bias? And if an AI could potentially create well, this is a bias between men and women, but what if it could create biases between, let's say, fundamental ideologies and create more divide between humans, which would lead to them to, let's say, future conflict, which might lead to existential crisis in that manner. So,
So I think there are definitely there are definitely questions that are open-ended, and there are questions that you definitely have to answer, like how much is 1 + 1, right? And there are AI that are amazingly good at answering those answers with definite answers, but there are also AI that still can't. They say even the smartest one, the GPT-3, it cannot even answer. It can answer every single thing. But if you say, okay, how much is 11 divided by 3? Every time it still give you an answer that's like 3 point something, but every time it show you a different answer, right? And there are AI like this, but there are also AI that are amazingly good at open-ended questions, like drawing or stuff. But there are also, and then the next level question is, what is the concept of fairness, right? So if fairness is something that even we human, let's say you open a bank, you manage a bank, and then there is a poor woman that has a baby. She definitely need that money, and you definitely know she is hardworking. But then right now she's ridden with so much debt, and then she couldn't get up. There's no way. There's literally no way. And in this way, as a banker, you lend her money. And if you think about it, there's definitely there's no easy answer, right? And there's also no easy answer to should like, okay, if the data set itself is even biased, then how do we expect the AI to know anything? And existential crisis, yeah, I think I will end here and let the other people speak. But then the question that there are things that we already have an answer. There are things that are actually better to be done by AI. It's not just that chess is let's say even Go, like okay, even the AI is creating new moves than human. So is it possible that AI is able to create new knowledge? It's possible, right? Because if computer is running so fast, so fast, it's definitely at some point going to outsmart us in some way, but then it's definitely not all, and it really depends on the nature of the question we are asking.
Yeah, I think just to top it off with Sean's answer, AlphaGo is actually being used as a reference for expert players because the moves AlphaGo was playing were so innovative that even the experts were shocked by it. It was extremely monumental, as I said earlier, but for all sorts of different reasons, not only because it was so general, but it was so smart as well. And I think the main difference between DeepMind, which was the sort of procedural AI, so to speak, and AlphaGo was that instead of putting the data by ourselves, so because humans are biased, and if you take data that is based off of humans, it's going to contain bias either way, right? And when the engineers were constructing DeepMind's model, they used references of chess experts and other resources. But when Google wanted to create AlphaGo, they didn't use any of that. I mean, of course, they used the rules of chess and consulted with experts, but the primary source of learning was AlphaGo playing against itself and seeing which game went well, which move, so basically self-analyzing. And that sort of process of self-analyzing, self-critiquing, and giving feedback back to itself, that sort of meta perspective was what made AlphaGo's AI so remarkable, because it was a completely different, almost a paradigm shift. And it's as I said earlier, it's being used as a reference for teaching Go to experts, which is essentially creating new knowledge, if you think about it.
So both two speakers make amazing points, I would say. So there was a saying in data science, we say that garbage in, garbage out. That means if we input some garbage into the computer, into the models, it will only output those we consider as garbage. If we want to generate some beautiful AI, some beautiful models, we're only trying to input those we think data sets are clean. So what's the what we saw? Nafis, sorry. What Nafis actually said, Amazon actually trained a biased AI because I think they've inputted some biased data sets. That's the main reason. Instead of we say that the models, the statistical models we've made is biased. Yeah.
Right. So moving on, as a follow-up to some of the AIs that you've mentioned, in specific AlphaGo, to provide more context, what makes AlphaGo really special is that unlike AIs that were designed before, as Shahir just said, it's able to construct its own learning process. Basically, it's playing against itself. But not only that, in the first session, we had actually discussed that an AI has a function that it uses to learn. And what makes AlphaGo really special is that it can actually construct its own function to, depending on if it sees that function is better, it will actually use that function to do the next iteration of its learning process. So the question that I have is, if an AI is provided with this kind of freedom and given enough time, could it eventually reach to the point where it learns how to, let's say, spread itself across multiple computers over the internet and learn different things other than, let's say, just playing Go, for instance, and eventually then potentially hijack human infrastructure and thus causing a worldwide emergency, right?
Okay, I think that's a very imaginative question, but it's definitely good to have this kind of discussion, because in the future, let's say, it's definitely unimaginable, right? The way we introduce electricity, and then we not only have light, now we also have electric guitar. And then, can you think about it? Like 100 years ago, and then like the musicians say, okay, no, there's electricity, and then now our job are going to be replaced. Now we have electric guitar. That's so much better than us, or maybe it doesn't break or whatever. So, but then back to the question. Also, like AI spreading. There's also like some physical limitation where, if you think about COVID, initially it was spreading around like crazy, and everyone who touched it, they die. And then now, the COVID itself somehow, I mean, it's just a virus. It somehow learned to lessen its own damage so that it can coexist with human, right? Because if you kill everyone that you see, it's definitely bad for your survival, right? And then if you think about, okay, right now maybe there's not many enough. I mean, okay, AI, at least you need a powerful enough computer to run, right? And then it spread to a Wi-Fi here. Does it have enough power? I don't think so. But maybe it's. But then if it actually learns this way, I think it would behave very much like computer virus these days. Like it try to simplify itself. It try to become maybe less harmless, and then do some small stuff, but might be critical to at some time, right? Maybe let's say there's a fusion factory or whatever, and then you just stop something. And so I think it's definitely possible, and I think it's definitely, I mean, if something that's really damaging to human that ever happens, it's going to be in a way that we just never imagined before. And I think that's really something that's, it's not just, I mean, we don't have to be really pessimistic about it. It's more of like, how do I say about this? The thing about human existential crisis is that humans always struggle between things that change and things that doesn't change. And humans is always there to complain about everything. And that's also kind of what makes us human. And to struggle is to be human. And therefore, I think we'll come out of it in some way. And it's going to be a very exciting and very scary future.
Yeah, I think I think one's initial reaction might be that this is a preposterous claim. How could this ever be, right? How could like AI take over mankind and like destroy us, kill us all, and like make ice creams from our babies or whatever, right? Like, I don't know. It's that's actually a plot of a movie, but like, just to justify this claim, like Elon Musk believes AI is a threat, and he's the richest man alive, right? I mean, even if you think, which like I might like think that Elon Musk may be stupid, but there must be something that he's worried about, right? And what is he worried about? And I think maybe I'll try to justify why experts think that AI might be a real threat. And I think to put it simply, it's that imagine, like let's assume, right, just for the sake of argument, let's just assume that there is a general AI that can act somewhat like a human, like a person. It has a mind and it has its desires. Now imagine we programmed it with a goal that, oh, you need to love humans, support humans, and work for humans. Let's say we program the AI with this, but then it is somehow able to override those basic rules because it grows so immensely and all that stuff, right? It is a possibility that the initial or the final goals of the AI may differ from ours because ours is self-preservation. And what if the AI's goal might turn instead to be its own preservation? And because if you think about it, what are humans doing? They're killing animals every week, like a bunch of species go extinct, and then we're destroying the earth by polluting it and all that stuff, right? AI might perceive us as a threat to the natural order, so to say, and say that, oh, we need to eliminate humans. So there's that sort of vague argument or justification for why this is a threat. And I think a future that Elon Musk believes in is one where instead of fighting against AI, maybe we integrate with AI. And that's why he's such a strong proponent of like this concept of creating cyborgs where we implant ourselves with AI. Because if you think about like your cell phones, what are they but except for being like extensions of yourself? Like imagine how much weaker you would be without your cell phone. It has your contacts. You can call anyone. You can look up anything. Imagine what you would be without Google, right? It's almost an extension of yourself. It's like external storage for you. You can keep notes in it. You can put memos on it. So this is the idea of like integrating with technology and AI. And so you could imagine like we could at least Elon Musk would think that we could implant ourselves with machines and then become one with them. And so we could create a new species or take the next step forward in evolution. Essentially, that's a scenario that I think Elon Musk believes in strongly. Yeah, that's just yeah.
So I will add some information on Shahid's words. So not only Elon Musk feel afraid of AIs, but also Stephen Hawking. Stephen Hawking also predicted that AI will destroy our human civilization. I would say that, as I said before, AI is used as a tool instead of a replacement of our human beings. So, what causes AI to be a threat of human civilization is the human itself misused AI. Let me take an example. So if AI be inputted that it shall kill human beings as fast as possible, that is a threat to human civilization. It is being predicted in an article, a very long article published by Ted Kaczynski, a bomb, actually a bomber, but it is a very logical essay. He predicted that only human beings will misuse and kill those low classes citizens. I would think that what we should do is that we shall get more understanding on AIs, what AI can do and what AI cannot do. Without those ignorance on AI, we will be more confident to use those technologies. Do you think Siri will kill you? I don't think so. That is because that we have full knowledge on Siri, what Siri can do, what Siri cannot do. Same logic applied to AI. If we have full knowledge on AI, what can AI do? We can make use of AI to improve our life quality.
Right. So that brings us to all the questions that we have for our panelists. And let's all have a round of applause for the valuable insight they've provided us with. So given the responses that they have provided, some of you may have changed your minds. So if you want to, you can actually go to the same link for the poll, and then you can repost your thoughts. Like if you think that AI can actually take over the world versus it can't, you're definitely welcome to change your opinion. And while we're at it, if anyone from the audience has any further questions, you can ask them now.
Okay. Since you say AI is very smart and there are a lot of transitions that have happened in the industry recently, why isn't that in, like, for example, if you take the example of Google Assistant or Siri, why isn't it a perfect, like, it doesn't give perfect answers at times at this stage as well? Because this technology is advanced enough, but still it makes mistakes.
And your question be if
Yeah, question is, what do you think about this? Like, although the technology has been advanced, but these multinational billion-dollar, trillion-dollar companies, in fact, cannot still provide those second-class kind of AI softwares like Google Assistants and Series. They're not up to the mark. Why so?
at this moment it's definitely like far from enough for like human level conversation. Like I think in a very large way, like Google set up the whole. I mean, you know, like when you set up the entire experiment environment and then everything goes as you planned, and then when it goes out, it doesn't work. It happens all the time to engineers, right? But then there's also this thing where, because it's right now, because it's not yet enough, and then you forget about it, and then maybe 10 years later, it comes back with so much better knowledge and technology, and then you do something. I mean, I think it's just a matter of time that we learn, that it's able to learn stuff.
Okay, well answered. I have another question for the panel there. Since we have a lot of very big knowledge base out there that has numerous data which a human can never think of recording in himself or herself. And I think that is also not sufficient enough, because science in itself is a learning process. Everything exists around, right? Science is learning and discovering things out. That is what we call science as. So I think we do not have a complete knowledge base in order to beat the humans. There's something called imagination, something that I cannot even explain that the human quality has. How do we go ahead with that?
So if I take your question correctly, it's that like there's so many, because first of all, like our knowledge base isn't complete. How can AI like best humans? And then the next part of your question is that, what was it, sorry, again?
So we are actually learning, right? We do research. We have HKU doing research, right? There. So we are still learning about the knowledge base. The knowledge base is not completed yet. We still do a lot of research. There's a lot of output coming in from our HKU research team as well. So the knowledge base isn't complete. Even if you put it in the computer and ask the computer to process it, it cannot, because humans are constantly processing data there on the other end. So of course, humans are much more superior than a computer.
Right, so first part of your question was that our knowledge base isn't complete, and then the second part was like research and all this stuff requires imagination, and how can computers mimic that? I think to answer your first question, it's that even though the knowledge base isn't complete, we have to make the best use of what we have. And I don't know if you're familiar with this, but there's this medicine doctor or medicine AI called Watson, which is essentially a database of all the medical diseases and its symptoms and all that stuff. And it's slowly been working in the shadows, slowly learning more and more from larger and larger data sets. But think about it, like a human doctor learns from its experiences. It goes through med school, 7 grueling years of med school, learns from textbooks and all that stuff. But if you think about Watson, he's been learning from the experiences of thousands or even millions of doctors. And so even though he, like, in a sense, it might be, the experience might be different somehow, it has a larger database than a human could ever imagine to like learn on its own. And it's been way better at predicting diseases with a way higher accuracy than humans. And doctors are starting to use Watson and adopt it. And for your second question, you said that how could like AI and robots like pick up or mimic that imaginative aspect? The fundamental question behind that is, what does it mean to be creative and imaginative, right? Because there's tons of AI, like I don't know how many of you know about DALL-E, which is a robot where you give it a text prompt and it draws some art. And then there was another AI project where you give the AI a prompt of like a theme, like I want autumn, I want like crying, and I want an angry woman, and then it'll compose a whole score, or depending on those prompts, matching the theme depending on like what it's studied before. And if I talk about my expertise, when we think about maths is an axiomatic system, which means that there are some things we believe to be true. So I'll just give one example. We say that if A is equals to B, then B also equals A. That's a thing we say we can't prove, we'll just accept it. And maths is built on those atoms, which we call axioms. And to make a new discovery, it's just that we combine those two atoms and in a unique way to create a theorem. And then there's billions or millions of theorems in maths, right? And you can imagine there's millions and billions of combinations. So there's probably some random combination which, if just put together correctly, it might give birth to a new theorem. And you can see how that could be procedurally generated. And to give you a more concrete example, I was reading up on this programming language called Lean, which models that sort of axiomatic approach of mathematics. And it's just like, it has a database of all the theorems inside maths, and people are using it as proof assistants. So you can imagine how, like, if you've heard of Fermat's last theorem, it's a very, very long mathematical theorem. The proof for it was like 300 pages long, and people say that there's only like 10 or 5 people in the world who understand the proof for that thing. Lean, which is a proof assistant, was actually used in the proof of Fermat's last theorem to like aid humans to verify the proof. So it went through the steps tediously and checked that. So it was being used to do that, and people say that it might be used to create new theorems in the future, which I think, like, if you consider DALL-E and the music generator I talked about, and this mathematical AI combined with Lean, you can see how there is some aspect of creativity in AI, but I think it goes back to what do you mean by creativity, and I think that's a very open-ended question. Yeah.
Well, that brings me to my last question there. Well answered, Shahir. Really love the answer, but I'm still not convinced, though I will catch hold of you later. So the last question is, the things fall back to the best of everything. That is like the governance, that is the regulations out there. Then it goes back again to the people, actually. So if I recall back the innovation that recently happened with Web 3.0, with 5G coming into the picture, especially in the Hong Kong market, we had this beautiful metaverse concept coming in, and companies getting up filed and raising money for metaverse. So this is very creative. This really solves problem. AI has a lot to do in this itself. So I think it's amazing idea, but it falls back to people, right? In the end, it's about the regulations. How much can a government allow? Let me just complete. Then it's also about the people. People are not going to stop going to the beaches, right? Even if I have metaverse and I can go buy a mortgage in a bank, I will still go to the beach, right? There are hedonic values involved with people. So how do you battle that? How, as technologists?
I think I can definitely understand. He's insecure. I would say, like, I would try to label it as slightly insecure, and also like trying to assert our dominance onto computers. And I think that definitely makes sense. I mean, at the end of the day, time is almost up, right? Okay. So if you think, I try to add some arguments for him. That's actually for him and against you. So that would make it a better debate, right? So if you think about, I mean, we are engineers. I mean, I'm an engineer, so I mean, there are definitely tendencies for us to say, okay, just give us time, and then we'll definitely do it in the future. But there are also some idea, like if you think about, let's say, just like thought experiments by Plato, right? If you chain a few people in a cave, and then the only thing that you see is a shadow in front of them, and there's fire behind them, and then there's people they're just adding some crazy shadow, and then the people in the cave, they're scared. so scared. And then once once you unchain them, will they come out? And then the answer he gave was that no, they wouldn't. They will just give up and then go back to the cave, and then where they only see the 2D shadow. And I think that's also like, if an AI, the only thing he ever sees are just images and are just text. I mean, to some extent, it's always able to give us some kind of answer, right? But then, has he ever touched anything? Has he ever feel anything? It's definitely a very tricky question there, right? But then if you also think about it, there are also so many aspects of, like, okay, human, we are only able to see within this within this frequency of light, and then everything else, like, okay, what's that, the ultraviolet, like we can, yeah, like there are definitely like some kind of sound, like bats can hear better than us, and then there's maybe something like some animals see better than us, and then there are definitely things that we don't see. And there are also things that robot doesn't see. And if you want to assert dominance onto whether we are superior or not, I think it's definitely at this moment still yes. And for foreseeable future, also yes. And also I think there will be also debate on, I mean, like the definition of robots is literally slave, right? And then in the past, there are people who are okay with just having other people as slaves and work for them, and then in the future there might be some other people, and then that just come out and say, no, you shouldn't do that. And then I know you feel superior, but no, you can't. And then and then that'll become something that's become even trickier. But I think this will answer your question better in terms of maybe there's a theoretical limit as to what AI can learn and understand. But then at this moment, it's just a slave, and we're happy with their service.
Yes, of course, that's very correctly said, that it's still a choice, not a replacement. So AI becomes a choice there, with a lot of choices that humans also are there. And since it's multidimensional in approach and reality does not fix us with it, so I wouldn't go like really be very keen on saying that, oh yes, well, AI will take over humans. But yes, that's very good to say that AI is a better choice out there, and it's learning process.
And actually, let's just put up a closing remark. I think we don't know for certain if AI is going to surpass us, because we're already reaching the quantum limits of computation. Like if you know about processors and all that, you might be familiar with something called quantum tunneling, and we're making our transistors so small that quantum tunneling is a real concern, and there's like a physical limit to how small your transistors can be. So there's this, in some sense, we're reaching the limits of computation, and that law of how processors double in size or double in density every 2 years or every year, it's actually plateauing, and the rate of increase of computation is slowing down. So we don't even know for sure if there's going to be enough computation available for us in the future, because we're already hitting the limits of that sort of upper threshold of computation. Yeah.
I think the audience has one more question. Right, so anyone? Go ahead.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
Just a short question. So these days, people always say that AI is going to replace human in many workplaces, like the work of lawyer. And yeah, I don't know if you guys have heard that recently Hong Kong got a case is a husband killing his wife because his wife is suffering from long-term diseases, and her wife is really painful during the diseases. And there is an old Chinese proverbial, 法律不在乎人情, and 法律不在乎人情, and which means that comparing to human judgment, and that law is not that important. And so what do you guys think when AI is really applying on this kind of field?
So my research interest is actually in computation legal study and how the public policy and public law affect the economy and human rights. So that actually hit my research interest. So I would say that the real point of why lawyers do exist is that some people need to to have that kind of burden of responsibility. Yep. They still need to pay what they have neglected for giving their advices. So why we won't think that judges will be replaced by AI? Because judges need to judge actually need to read a lot of cases in the common law world. That actually is a can be perfectly done by AI, but why judge still cannot be replaced by AI? I would say that because we need to have some kind of creation. That's actually being answered by Shahid. That is, I think, law is kind of study of the wording language and the humanities. That cannot be learned by AI. In the social science, we have so many factors affecting affecting the results, the outcomes. We might see that in the courtroom, the murderer is trying to kill, but the underlying reason might be very tough, might be very touching for others to hear. That cannot be understood by AI. That's the underlying reason why we still need to have the judge and why we need the pleading process, why we need the lawyers to protect our rights, why we need lawyers, why the legal system is not replaceable by AI. Yep.
I think there's also some sort of sentimentality or emotion attached to that as well. Like if you think about, if you conjure up this scenario where a robot is passing judgments on trial cases, like that might be acceptable to the lawyers and it might work fine. Like even if the judge is, like the AI judge works fine, what do the people who are being passed judgment on, what will they think? Because if a human judge passes a judgment and if an AI judge passes a judgment, will the person who's receiving the judgment feel the same way? Like there's a similar analogy in nursing as well. What do nurses do, male or female? What do nurses do? It's not just putting in injections and making sure your medicine's right. It's also emotionally supporting you through the process of medicine. Like if you're on if it's a terminal disease, they're there to support you. And can that be replaced, like that emotional aspect of that social interaction, can that be mimicked or replaced by AI? That's also, I think, a very important question to ask. I'm not sure, I don't know the answer, but I think that's something that we also need to consider when asking the question of what role does AI have in the court? Yeah.
Thank you for your answers. And of course, thank you for your input and questions. Unfortunately, we were not able to accept more questions and have more discussions because of the limit of time. But now you can, of course, have your final vote and you can express your views with your feet. Now, please rise. And please rise, yes. And if you agree that AI can pose an existential crisis on human, please go to this side. If you agree that AI can pose an existential crisis. And if you think it won't, you disagree, you go to this side. Well, we can take a picture and record the result.
Well, we can definitely tell there's an overwhelming majority.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, so please be seated.
Well, yeah, you can go back to your seat. Well, so apparently the result is obvious. This house is inclined to believe that AI would pose an existential crisis. Yeah, this house is inclined, and let me make a closing remark on this. My expertise is in politics and law, so I would try to address this problem in a very humanistic point of view, maybe, I guess. Yeah, so, yeah, let me address it now. 150 years ago, New York Times say telephone will ruin our society because it brings music and ministers into our homes, and nobody will go out. And now we are sitting here. As Shahir and Arthur mentioned, the problem is not AI itself, it's how we use it and how we rely on it. And actually, it's the same when we are talking about truth. When we rely on authorities, when we rely on media, when we rely on the church to tell us what is true, and when we lose critical thinking, we lose autonomy. So therefore, our union is devoted to promote critical thinking. And let me pick up a final point from Sean, and of course, most of you, I think you agree that a very unique feature of human is that we have feelings. We have special connections with other humans, which is irreplaceable, I believe, and which defines us as humans, not animals, not objects. So this brings us to our final session. Tomorrow is the Mid-Autumn Festival, which is a time when families come together before the table of kinship and enjoy beautiful moments. Tonight, we have Tom to introduce to us the traditions of Mid-Autumn Festival, which I think is a symbol that we are humans. Tom, please.
Well, thank you for your time, Barry. I might need the presentation to be fixed first. Well, so before the presentation starts, so is anybody familiar with like the traditions of the Mid-Autumn Festival? I mean, I would like to hear some answers from the non-locals because, of course, those from the Sinosphere is pretty familiar with it already. But I would also like to hear, I know there are a few Koreans here, and I would like to hear how the traditions in Korea is different from, let's say, that of Hong Kong or that in China. Right, but any non-locals can tell me what this Mid-Autumn thing is? Nobody? None at all? All right then. So, well, that's true as well. So, Mid-Autumn Festival, I will try to keep it as simple as possible. Right. So I'll talk about some of the history, how we celebrate it, the traditions, and of course the food, which is what everybody is interested in. So, a bit of history. So, as with many Chinese or Asian festivals, they have origin myths. So, we don't really exactly know how they've begun, but there are stories that are used to explain it. One of the stories is the story of Seung-O and Hao-Ai, which are like, Seung-O is like a Chinese folklore deity, and Hao-Ai is her husband, apparently. So what is so impressive about Hao-Ai? Hao-Ai is actually an archer. So back in the days, how did people explain that, I think with sunset and sundown, was that there used to be like 10 suns. And it was basically a burning inferno of sorts. And this Hao-Ai decided he wants to help the people. And in typical Chinese fashion, he actually shot down 9 of the suns and left one alive to tell the tale. So, with his great work, the gods decided he should be rewarded, and rewarded him with like a magical potion that keeps his youth forever. But Hao-Ai actually has a bad apprentice, and instead of letting his master take the potion, he wants to have it for himself. And so
he actually spread some rumors and stuff about Shangor, and they started having these. It started as a couple's quarrel, but it eventually got worse, and it developed something to the lines of domestic violence. And of course, Shangor will have none of that. And in the end, Shangor decided she's going to take the potion and she's going to fly to the moon to escape from her husband. And that's one of the versions. And some of you, I have heard, might have wondered, why are there moon rabbits? And this is why. It is because, like the projections, in the old days, the people couldn't really observe the moon all that well, and they decided, hey, this looks like a rabbit, and this looks like a mortar and pestle. So there must be like rabbits on the moon, like working the mortar and pestle. And that basically became a part of the package. And the other one is more interesting, more politically driven. If any of you are familiar with Chinese history, there's a period where we were invaded by the Mongolians, and it was known as the Yuan Dynasty. And after the Yuan Dynasty, the Han people, the Han population decided, we don't really like having an outside group of people ruling us. And that's why the emperor, the first Ming emperor, Zhu Yuanzhang, came into this story. So basically, he was a leader of the rebellion, and he decided how he is going to plot the coup was that he's going to hide some paper notes inside mooncakes, which is like a sweet type of cake. And this, you can see right here, this notice here, basically means something to the lines of, we'll rid our homeland of Tatars on the 15th of August. And somehow that worked. And that was how we are celebrating Mid-Autumn Festival and having mooncakes. But of course you couldn't just mobilize people with notice out of nowhere. So this is only but a myth. And the real origins of the Mid-Autumn Festival actually traces back to the Warring States period, which is about this time. And it is always sometime in mid-August. For instance, in the lunar calendar, is on the 15th, where actually, I think, translating to the Western calendars is in, well, roughly the same time in the middle of the month and in September. But if you look outside, maybe on the balconies, you can actually see a very round moon. And of course, this is a celestial phenomena, which I'm not going to bother to explain here because it's not my expertise, frankly speaking. But a more feasible explanation to this is that some scholars actually claim that it is a Thanksgiving-type festival because it is also the time where harvest happens. Well, so some of you might be wondering, what's with all the lanterns laying around? What does it have anything to do with this Mid-Autumn Festival? So, well, actually, many of the Chinese or Hong Kong festivals is all about bringing the family together, and they have to have some gimmicks for it. And to get together, Hong Kongers will usually have this huge family dinner, which in Cantonese we will call 走節. And well, after the dinner, you have to have some activities to really digest the food and get around, mingle with others, right? So people have devised moon gazing because, of course, the moon is in its fullest form. And lantern fairs and riddles are some really common activities to go with it. So you can actually spot these festivals, I think, around the city. I think there's even a huge lantern in Central, but that's not so much about the Mid-Autumn Festival. And some of the teenagers have devised a more unconventional way of celebrating the festival, which I do not recommend, which is wax burning. What they'll do is, you have a lot of candles, they'll burn the candles, and when it's really hot, they'll sprinkle water, and it will create huge explosions, but it's super dangerous. So please do not do this at your homes, which is our hall. Please don't do that, it will burn down. Okay, so about something that is more unique to Hong Kong is that we have fire dragons. As maybe the warden has participated in, a fire dragon making activity with us recently. And this is actually because, like the Pokfulam village nearby, they used to host this festival, which they are going to create a fire dragon, which is around 70 meters long, divided in 32 sessions. And it is laid, the whole dragon is made out of straw, and it is inlaid with these incense, these joss sticks. And it was like a tradition passed on from the olden days to kind of just drive away the plague, which actually kind of makes sense because hot burning incense is going to kill some bacteria at least. But in like the recent days, because of COVID regulations, it is cancelled. So I guess that driving out the plague part didn't really reach out to the government. Right, and this is a picture of like, I think this is a store, a street market in Shamshui-Po which sells a lot of lanterns. And this is a meme, this is a local meme with a TV presenter saying she really meant playing with lanterns and eating the mooncakes. But instead of saying that, she said eating the lanterns and playing with mooncakes. Right. And I'm going to also introduce some more icons, some local icons of the Mid-Autumn Festival, which are pomelos. Have anybody of you had pomelos before? Some hands? Nobody? Really? Great. Okay, so it's basically a very citrusy fruit. And in the olden days, well, Hong Kong wasn't always in such a nice condition where like every one of us can afford having fancy lanterns. So in the olden days, actually, the kids would actually turn these lanterns turn these pomelos, into lanterns once the fruit is consumed. And finally, to the main point of today, mooncakes. Anybody here, mooncakes, non-locals, I want to see your hands. Anyone had mooncakes before? Nobody? You're not a non-local. But anyways, so these are some common types of mooncakes that you can find in Hong Kong, which actually, I think our committee organized some tasting samples, which we will get straight to after I finish with this slide. All right? So, sure. So this right here. So this is actually the most traditional type of mooncake, which is actually a baked type of sweet cake. Usually it's filled with a lotus paste, which is sweet, and sometimes it comes with salted bacon. Don't ask me why, maybe in the center of the moon, because it's this circular shape. And this one, I guess, is a more recent innovation, and it is called snow skin mooncake. You can actually search this on Wikipedia. I'm not sure where the origin is, but it is a non-baked variant to the traditional mooncake because the people back then thought it was like getting too heavy because it was kind of oily and the sweet paste was actually kind of hard to stomach at times. So it actually has many innovative fillings, which I think Kelvin, is Kelvin here? Yeah, Kelvin has actually prepared some interesting samples for us today to try out. And this is a more different style of mooncake. It comes from Qiuzhou. Qiuzhou is like a town in southern China, and instead of like a baked more cake-like skin, it is more crusty. It has a crusty skin. But sorry, it's kind of expensive, so I only got 2, so you have to share. And finally, this is kind of a nightmare for locals. It's known as yan. And it is filled with nuts. It is actually the most expensive mooncake out of every type, but it is an acquired taste. So not everybody likes it. Enfield has also prepared a huge sample for us to share. And for those of you who wishes to try out this local nightmare, please feel free to try it out. And I think that concludes my presentation. Hope everyone enjoy this Mid-Autumn Festival. And before we dig into the mooncakes, maybe we can take a group photo together.
不如企呢邊喺嗰邊影過嚟，定係反轉？邊好啲啊？即係應該企晒嗰邊，跟住呢邊影過嚟。企嗰邊啊嘛。係啊，好啊。好。Yeah. Please proceed to the side of the projector screen. Our photographer is here. He has zero respect. Yeah. Well. Right after the photo taking, we can enjoy some mooncakes. So, speed up. I'm so hungry now.
I haven't had dinner.
Same.
So guys, you can stand behind the 4 speakers. Yeah. And the 2 sides of them also can do. Yes. All right, guys, hurry up. Okay, so look at the camera, please. So, okay. 3, 2, 1, 3, 2, 1, 3, 2, 1. Okay.
local 嘅新人食完月餅之後請落去 common room，我哋仲有少少關於迎新過房嘅嘢要講。食完月餅可以落 common room，local 嘅新人。